3 rounds of questions. Each round should consist of 3 questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. I just have a question for Professor King. It's a little curiosity because I heard the proposal, which is, is clearly correct. That if in fact the operating environment demands better trained labor force, more highly educated population, better engaged certainly with the technology, that's the way really to ensure that we can benefit from the changes which in fact have taken place. I mean, I'm taking it as a given that we are in fact in the 4th revolution, as you have said. However, we are also in the era of concentration of wealth. I consider it a very dangerous trend where wealth seems to be concentrated, which means then that somebody is making money from the current system. And then yesterday we heard one of the presenters suggest to us that maybe, based on the statistics, the pool of innovators seem to be becoming less educated. In other words, the message to the student is then that you don't need a university degree to make money. With the demand for new and better skills, and then that seeming trend whereby in order to make money from the system, you don't need this very skill upgrade, so to speak, or the education. It seems to be a contradiction, so I'm wondering if you can clarify in my own mind what is going on.
Okay. Basically, my question is similar to what Mr. Green has suggested, but a little different, is that what is the importance of curriculum change from kindergarten to tertiary and above 50 years, which is now being affected by GATE, with regard to what Mrs. Mary King was saying. Because I believe that there is a very important aspect of curriculum change that's needed in our education system so that some of the things that are being said in this forum can be realized.
The second paper talked about whether it seems to say that we have a choice between sort of export-led growth and non-export-led growth. It implies that. That makes sense. That seems to make sense in China. In fact, as we know, China first started with sort of export-led growth, and then they made a decision that possibly they have to build their economies by looking at their own sort of population. But that model does not, let me see this properly. In my mind, that does not apply to, in fact, sort of the region. We are, in fact, small economies, and there's no way that we could ever produce all the things that we require. Drugs, machinery, computers, electronics, almost everything. I mean, if you go into the shops, if you go into Massey down the street, you will see the kind of imports that are, in fact, that are coming in. Some of them we can say that we don't need them, but there are some of them that we need desperately, and we must do that. Nobody wants $20. So the only way to get those imports, the only way to get that is by sort of exporting. So there is a synergy between what we need to live and what we have to sort of export, etc. So in sort of our economies then, right, that what is important is what we earn and what we and sort of what we buy, okay, and that then is in fact sort of the problem, right? There is in fact sort of the view that the only way we develop is if we can export more than sort of we import, right? And that difference is what drives growth, etc. Now, what complicates the system is that many of us only export one thing, so oil and gas and sort of etc. So of course there's a relationship between exports and sort of imports, but and sort of what we have found is that when we got into trouble, like we are in now, it's almost impossible to replace some of the exports, some of the imports, right? We can't do that. And worse yet is that we can't immediately export. So sort of the problem we have is that now what we have is, so my wife says, has been saying over and over, the only option we have is to shut down the economy because we cannot respond. So therefore the problem is not about whether it should be export-led growth or not, right? The model that we have demands that we export, and it demands so much that we export more than we import to grow. But then there's a pressure on sort of imports. That I think where the problem is. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I am an engineer.
Okay, can you please answer the questions, please, and then we'll take your questions after the answers.
We have been talking about this problem for, I don't know how many years now. Are you hearing me? It's on? Yeah, I said we've been talking about this problem of the lack of the fourth level skills, which we have not been developing over the years. We have continued to base our education system on the old colonial system, primary school, secondary school, university, almost by rote. We have had so many university graduates over the last 10 years, I would say. And when you look at our situation, over 79% of those graduates emigrate. And they emigrate why? Because we have not developed the industry, we have not developed the research institutions which will keep them here. They go away and they do very, very well. The concentration of wealth, yes, we have allowed that to happen because we're an import trading country. The energy monies come to the government. The government disperses through its budget the facilities to allow the onshore sector to trade. We import everything that we use. Just look at everything that you're wearing, everything that you eat. Well, let's say forget the lettuce and the bhaji, but we import everything that we eat, and we have got to change the situation. Now, the private sector is not going to get involved in the research and development that is required, and therefore, I have been saying for years, and I continue and I insist on saying, the government is the capitalist or the investor of last resort if we are serious about diversification of this economy. There is no interest from the banks or the private sector to get involved in the research and the development that's necessary. The government has to start doing its foresighting. It has to look at what are those things that we have which will make us competitive on the world stage, and this involves the increase and the development of the fourth level people into the research and development. Yes, we need tertiary education, but after that there is the postgraduate research institutions. Just look at countries across the world which have been successful. Look at MIT, look at London, look at China, look at Norway. Norway is oil-based, but it's almost totally now diversified. They're not depending on their Heritage Stabilization Fund for anything except the interest of it. So we really have to get involved in the curriculum from day one, from pre-primary. And to tell me that because we stopped the laptop program, that we are not interested in fourth industrial revolution is nonsense, because to give a laptop to an 11-year-old up to a 15-year-old, you're making them consumers of computers, consumers of laptops, users of laptops, but you have not introduced anything as far as context, as far as linking that education system to the world, to the internet. We haven't got any school in this country which is linked to any overseas expert university doing research with us, not at all. So our whole attitude has got to change, our whole mindset has got to change. And if we don't, and we know that oil is dwindling and the gas price bumped up last night, but how long will that be up? We have got to really take this country serious if we want to leave something for the future.
Okay, thank
I think
you.
there was another question on curriculum. I've answered that too. Yeah?
Okay, to answer your question, I'm sorry if I implied that there was a choice between export-led growth and non-export-led growth. And I totally agree that practice of domestic demand-led growth is not appropriate for the Caribbean economies because of our size. What I'm trying to say, or what the model has presented, is that exports does contribute to productivity theoretically. And however, Caribbean exports currently, according to the data and according to the simulation and the analysis given McIntyre in 1992, that was 24 years ago, and our results now are the same in that exports are not contributing to non-export GDP growth. We need to find a way to diversify our markets, diversify our exports, so that we can get that positive contribution that we need from the export sector and the positive spillover effects by extension. So I agree that we need export-led growth. We can't have domestic demand-led growth. We can't have, I don't think it's appropriate to have any other type of trade policy, whether it be import substitution or balanced growth trade. We need to have export-led growth, and it has been said over and over by policymakers that the export-led growth strategy is what the Caribbean needs, and I agree fully. But the paper was just presenting that our exports are not positively contributing to growth as it should be.
Right, thank you.
I think what you're saying is that our exports, the money from our exports is not contributing to diversification onshore, which comes back to the basic problem.
Right. We have time only for one round of questions, the final round. Please keep your questions short. Go ahead. Yes.
Good morning. I'm Rosalind Khan Cummings, a former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Trade. This question is for Ms. Gokul. I guess the conclusion is that we haven't benefited from inter-regional trade since the signing of the EPA, more or less the conclusion. But I'm just wondering, when you did your analysis, your econometric analyses, whether you looked at the areas of trade, the goods traded, because I was involved in the negotiation of the EPA as a PS in the Ministry of Trade, and what I found was a window of opportunity in that whole agreement was the cultural cooperation agreement that was signed. That came as a kind of last resort due to the work of the Prime Minister of Barbados. Yesterday, Mr. Green made an excellent presentation about cultural diplomacy, and that's an area that I think we haven't exploited, that cooperation agreement within the EPA, because that's what I saw as the only benefit from that agreement, because it really wasn't in favor of developing countries. And we rushed to complete it. We saw that Africa took their time, but with Trinidad and Tobago, and the rest of the CARICOM, we were anxious to meet that deadline of 2008. But I just wondered whether you had give us any idea of the areas of export that you have addressed, because I didn't really see any range of goods, whether that was in part of your analysis. All right, thanks.
Okay, sir.
Thank you very much. I want to compliment Ms. Gokul particularly for creating that bridge with her models and the whole trade arrangement. But my question is, particularly leading off from the EPA, to what extent has been the EPA been influenced by CARIFORUM or CARICOM? And has the EPA been simply handed down to us, to the region, like FATCA? Or did we have an opportunity? Because if it's an agreement, there must be consensus on both sides. To what degree has the country been able, because if we're looking at diversification, this has to be driven by something, and the agreement must include that as well in order for our trade and economy to factor what we need to do. But again, that's a beautiful presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for your questions and the comments that were raised. Let me start by letting you know that this is ongoing research as part of a wider PhD thesis that I'm doing, looking at the economic impact of the Economic Partnership Agreement. With regards to the first question, each one of these simulations focus only on commodity trade. Data comes from the UN Comtrade database. In particular, for each one of them, the analysis gives us an indication of what would be the impact of merchandise trade. Merchandise trade in general makes up the majority of the trade that the region trades in, notwithstanding that the services sector do provide excellent opportunities for diversification. This paper does not explicitly deal with services because data on services is not as readily available. But it's definitely some of those considerations in the conclusion of the paper. That's one. With regards to the agreement itself, in 2002, the Cotonou Agreement replaced the various Lomé conventions. This particular agreement essentially maintained the status quo in terms of EDF funding and aid for trade, but the adjusting factor for this particular agreement was that reciprocity was part of it, in that the same benefits that the CARICOM countries obtained in the EU market must be extended to those countries of the region, those countries of the EU region. Aside from that condition, in 2002, it was decided that the agreement be broken up into smaller agreements, in that prior to 2000, the EU bloc negotiated with the ACP countries as a whole. Subsequent to that, and in the Cotonou Agreement, there were adjustments to enable region-specific agreements to be crafted that reflected the economic and social and historical and cultural realities of those regions. The CARIFORUM countries is the Caribbean bloc, and our agreement, as you rightly said, was the first to be signed in 2008. Negotiations began between 2002 and 2003, and it continued up to 2008. This was a regional negotiation front that was put forward. Whether the agreement in hindsight contributed to development or not, the specific economic partnership agreement between CARIFORUM and the EU is up for review every 5 years. Between 2013 and 2014, which would have been the first 5-year review, several studies were submitted, several studies in terms of what was the economic impact of the agreement was suggested. As far as I'm aware, this type of analysis was not included in that review, and as such, a paper like mine, and needless to say, a thesis like mine, contributes to the literature in terms of what is the economic impact, because I've used several quantitative methods, including the welfare analysis. I'm happy to chat with anyone if it is that you have further questions, but I think this is basically it for this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, this session, Trade and Development, is now closed. Please join me in thanking you for being here today, and also our presenters.